Okay, thank you very much for watching. And today we turn our attention to the FIFA World Cup qualifiers 2026 World Cup to be staged in USA, Canada, and Mexico. And the qualifiers are in full swing in Africa. You have witnessed some incredible performances by some minnows on the continent, and it's always expected that teams like Senegal, Ghana, Mali, Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, Morocco will be leading their respective groups when the World Cup kickstarts. But there are some unusual leaders in some of the groups. For instance, in a group that contains Nigeria, South Africa, and Benin, it is Lesotho and Rwanda who lead that particular group. So it's quite surprising in there that Nigeria, South Africa, Benin are in a group and Lesotho leads that group. There is also Madagascar leading a group that contains Ghana and Mali. That is also surprising in there. It was Comoros before they were deposed at the top by the national team of Madagascar. And the third one has got to do with Sudan leading a group that contains DR Congo and African top guns Senegal. And the Sudanese national team is coached by none other than Ghana's own Kwesi Appiah. So Kwesi Appiah was the first Ghanaian coach to lead the Black Stars to the World Cup, and that was in 2014, and including that famous victory against the Egypt Pharaohs in Kumasi 6-1, the lowest the Egyptians have ever gotten in terms of their qualification matches. It was led and masterminded by Kwesi Appiah. Now the Sudan national team have come for him. How did that happen? Kwesi Appiah used to coach Sudanese club Khartoum Al Watani. He led them to an incredible African Confederations Cup group stage before he left to come back to Ghana for a second time. So he's quite familiar with the game in Sudan. And so when the Sudanese officials went to the market to look for a new coach, it wasn't difficult to land on Kwesi Appiah, who was then not attached to any club or national team. I was only a board member of his former club, Kumasi Asante Kotoko. He signed a 3-year deal for the Sudanese national team to begin work. Then, the most incredible part of it, when the Sudanese officials approached him, Kwesi Appiah decided to create opportunity for some other Ghanaians as well. So he called his former goalkeeper Fatau Dauda, who he had taken to the AFCON in 2013 in South Africa and the World Cup 2014 in Brazil. He called a young coach, Ignatius Fosu, who has been coach of Mediama FC previously, and took them as his backroom staff to Sudan. Not to Sudan particularly. Why not to Sudan? He took them to Saudi Arabia because there is raging war in Sudan. The Sudanese country has come under intense chaos since April 2023. April 2023. How has the war come about? This war has come about because two rival factions in Sudan have clashed over power. I'm not an expert of this area of politics. But what I know is that there was President Omar al-Bashir, the former president of Sudan, and having doubts of the trust in the military in Sudan, decided to create his own military, and that's the Janjaweed, who were, allies of the former president Omar al-Bashir. And the Janjaweed was a paramilitary group that was to protect the president against any possible or potential coups. So he did not trust the military, set up his own military, that's a paramilitary group, to protect him. And this paramilitary group, surprisingly, went behind the president, joined forces with the original military of the country to depose President Omar al-Bashir. And when he was ousted, the two groups are chasing power. They are fighting for the same power. And this is why Sudan is in complete chaos now. Everybody has left the capital. Many people have left there. Over 15,000 casualties reported and fatalities across the country, including the war-torn Darfur. So Kwesi Appiah could not go to Sudan when he signed for the national team. His unveiling was done unusually in Saudi Arabia, where he began camping with the national team over the couple of months. The difficulty also is not because Sudan was only at war. The national team was in chaos. It was in complete ruins. They had not won a game since March of 2023. and the war broke out a month later. So when Kwesi Appiah signed, the difficulty was getting the team together and to win their first game to bring back the confidence of the Sudanese people. That was a very big task. His first game was against Chad. Kwesi Appiah led the Sudanese national team to a very historic win over Chad in November 2023. And that is when they began winning. But the win did not continue for a long time because their first World Cup qualifying game was against Togo. And they trained in Saudi Arabia. You see how chaotic the entire Sudanese football structure had turned into, particularly the national team. They camp in Saudi Arabia and play their matches in Libya. So Kwesi Appiah started the campaign in Saudi Arabia and they played their matches in Libya at the Martyr Stadium. They hosted Togo and it was a 1-1 draw. That was their first game. Without their fans behind them, without their favorite Khartoum Stadium, and without their chanting supporters putting fear in the opposition. They play in somewhat empty stadiums in Libya because of the war in Sudan. So this is where Kwesi Appiah finds himself. But there have been no complaints. Kwesi Appiah's second game was against DR Congo, who have been to the World Cup before. Sudan have never played at the World Cup. DR Congo came to the Martyr Stadium and Kwesi Appiah's team had a historic 1-0 win over DR Congo. And this brought back the confidence, the fans, some of them trying to travel to watch the games in Libya. It didn't end there. The third game in the qualifiers was against Mauritania, who had not lost in Nouakchott. That's their capital. They had not lost in Nouakchott for over 10 years. Kwesi Appiah's national team went there, and Sudan, at the end of the game, beat the Mauritania national team by 2-0 in Nouakchott. That was a very historic win. So after 3 qualification games, now this is how the group looks like in B. Sudan national team, the Sukur Al-Jidaini, that's the nickname of their national team. Sukur Al-Jidaini, the Crocodile Niles of Sudan, lead the group with 7 points. Senegal in second with 5 points. DR Congo with 4, Togo with 3, South Sudan with 2, and Mauritania with only 1 point. So this is how the group currently look like for Kwesi Appiah's Sudan. National team of Sudan on top of a group that consists of DR Congo and Senegal and Togo. So this is where a lot of attention has gone in, not only in Ghana, but across the continent, on how Kwesi Appiah, a coach, an African coach, very unusual and uncharacteristic of African national teams or federations, to hire coaches from compatriot or fellow African countries. But this is what the Sudanese have done, and Kwesi Appiah is leading them. How will the group turn out? There is another qualifier early this week. Sudan will be flying to Juba to face their rivals, South Sudan. These two countries were together until somewhere 2011, when South Sudan became the newborn baby of the world, the newest country in the world. Now South Sudan will face their former country, Sudan, in a World Cup qualifier. And the tipsters and bookmakers have already tipped that Kwesi Appiah's Sudan will likely get a victory in Juba. And if they win in Juba, that will be 10 points. They've not won yet, but the permutations and calculations, that will also depend on what happens in the matches between Senegal and DR Congo respectively, how they fare in their respective games. So if Sudan, as per the bookmakers, 60-70% chance of winning in Juba, if they're able to do this, then Kwesi Appiah's team will still sit at the top of the league or table with 10 points. And if that happens, he opens a gap. I don't know what happens between Senegal and the other games, DR Congo as well. But that will be very massive and crucial for Sudan's World Cup chances. Kwesi Appiah has said on his unveiling that his aim is to get the Sudanese national team to play at the World Cup for the very first time in their history. And this is a child's job. This is a very, very difficult task to qualify Sudan for the World Cup. But Kwesi is on track. So we wait to see what happens and how the fans will receive the national team if something like that happens. As of now, the fans are, in tests. they are not witnessing their national team play. But of course, they are behind Kwesi Appiah in spirit, and also the national team flying around from Saudi Arabia to Libya and to other countries to play. So they have played 2 home games, and they are going to play their second away game. So that will be 4 games. And if they win, that will be 2 wins away, 1 win at home and 1 draw. And imagine if they had the opportunity of playing at the Sudan National Stadium in Khartoum. That would have been very, very massive for Kwesi Appiah. So upon all the difficulty and the war in Sudan, Kwesi Appiah's national team, Sudan, is now on top of that group and has started, getting some confidence, and there's vivacity around the national team and the fans. I watched their game against, highlights of the game against Mauritania, and they play with such high level of alacrity and zeal. You clearly can see that this is a team that wants to prove something and to end the war back home. I don't know what this means to the warring factions to put their tools down, as happened with Drogba and his teammate when Ivory Coast finally qualified for the World Cup. A qualification for Sudan to the World Cup will be massive in restoring peace to the region in general, and that is why a lot of people are behind Kwesi Appiah and rooting for him to qualify. And I checked the groups. I think the last but 1 game for Sudan in the World Cup qualification phase is against Togo in Lomé. And imagine Kwesi Appiah's national team needing 1 point to qualify for the World Cup and traveling to Togo for the last game, or last but 1 game. And Ghanaians coming to understand that this will be historic for Kwesi Appiah. A lot of people I know who burst themselves and go to Kege to support Sudan to get the point against Togo for Kwesi to qualify for the World Cup. A very good man, very generous man. He knows his job and has come to Ghana twice to lead the national team. 1 to the World Cup and African Cup of Nations twice or thrice. But this time it's against Ghana, or not for Ghana. It's for Sudan. And we are all rooting for him, making a name for himself in Sudan. The Sukur Al-Jidani are performing spectacularly well under Kwesi Appiah. And we hope that this continues. We'll be monitoring keenly the game they play against South Sudan in Juba on Monday or Tuesday. So congratulations to Kwesi and Ignatius Fosu so far. We think that this is a good job, and we hope that Sudan qualifies alongside Ghana for the World Cup in USA 2026, Canada, Mexico 2026. So kudos, Kwesi. Thank you very much, and keep going, keep winning.